Hi, we've covered almost all the basics. We've covered such topics as input and output, variables, arithmetic operations, and if statements. And the title of this task is looping with numbers, and loops are the last mechanism or the last concept that you need to learn in this section. So what are loops and when do you need to use them, or when would you want to use them? Loops are useful whenever you want to repeat something. So let's say you have an instruction or a block of code, couple instructions one after another, and you want to repeat them number of times. Maybe you already know how many times you want to repeat it. So let's say you want to print something to standard output. You know that you can use echo for it. So let's say you want to use echo hello 5 times, and you can copy and paste 5 times echo hello. So with 5, maybe it's doable, but it's not that nice. But what if you wanted to do it 100 times? Yeah, with echo, maybe it's not a good idea to do it either way. But there might be cases with some other instructions that you want to repeat them a number of times, and maybe even this number you don't know it. You want you want your users of your program to input this number. So you want to repeat a given instruction variable number of times. How can you do it? You can't do it with the things that we've learned so far. You need to use loops. So whenever there is a repetition, you can use loops and they will make your life easier. And in some cases, like in this variable number of repetitions, that's pretty much the only way, the only approach that you can take in order to solve this problem. And the other common thing that you can do with loops, and that's the thing that we'll be doing right now, is to iterate through elements from some collection. So this collection could be numbers, for example, like we have here, but it could be also files, text, like strings, and so on. So it doesn't have to be a collection with numbers only, but usually we start with numbers because that's the easiest thing we can do. So let's open the terminal and first try to build a very simple for loop. I'm saying for loop because there are other types of loops, but in this case we will be using for loop, and we will be analyzing the elements, the building blocks of the for loop. How can we do it the best way? What are the possible ways to do it in Bash? Because like with everything else, you have more than one approach that you can take, but some are more modern than others, and some maybe are easier than others. So we can definitely take a look at it. And without any bigger introduction, let's just get into it. We will open a script and we will try to build a small for loop. So we've already mentioned that we want to use a for loop, and we've also mentioned that for loop is used to iterate through elements of a collection. So we can write it maybe like this. Let's first write what we want to do, and then we will explain it. For element in a collection, and Bash allows us to create the collection on the spot. And that's the syntax. So first we are specifying which type of loop we are using. In this case, it's for loop. Then we are creating a variable. Inside this variable, we will be storing the elements of a collection that we are iterating through. We can call it however we want. In this case, I called it elem. And then we need to give the collection that we want to iterate through. And we can either create it right here, at this place, or if it already exists in the memory, we can reference it here. And then we have to give the instructions or the commands, the code that we want to execute in each iteration. In our case, we can simply use echo, but we can use whatever we want. We can put, for example, echo hello, and then it will iterate through each element of this collection, and for each one of them, it will print hello. But in this case, we would not use the value of the element. So maybe first, let's try to see the elements. We can display them like this. And we know that we are using a $sign to access the value of a variable, and in the end we have to complete the for loop with done. Fi is for if statements and done is for loops. So we can save it and try to execute it. And that's what we've got. We have 3 elements, and our variable element is getting access to each value. And those elements don't have to be numbers, they don't have to be ordered. So we can start, for example, with 5 and then 2 and then maybe string like ABC. We can use single quotes. We don't have to use any quotes at all, but maybe that's easier to differentiate between the numbers and the strings. So let's try to do it like this. And that's how we do it. And in the case of our task, that they want us to display the natural numbers from 1 to 50. So we could, of course, write this whole sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but maybe that's not the best approach. There is a way to create a collection of numbers directly in Bash with just specifying the first number, the step, and the last number. And the default step is 1. So let's try to see how it works. We can simply use the curly braces for it. And first we have to specify the first number. So let's maybe try with 1. Then 2 dots. And then the last number. Maybe first we can do 5 just to see if it works. And that's our last number. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we could, of course, use the last approach and simply write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 till 50, but that's not that easy, and it's not really doable when we want to display or use more numbers. So that's why probably they created this easier way of creating collections with just specifying the first element. In this case, if we want to solve the task, it's 1, and the last element is 50, and the default step is 1. We can also change the step. I think in one task they will want us to do it, but for now let's simply do it like this. And in the task they don't want us to display anything else, only the numbers. So that's how we could do it. Let's test it in the terminal first, if it worked correctly. And we've got numbers from 1 to 50. So that's how we can use a for loop. We can iterate through a collection. Either we have this collection already in memory, or we are creating it inside the for loop at the very top, and then we are iterating through those elements. Or maybe we want to just specify the first number and the last number, and the Bash will create the collection for us. So we can copy the script and try it on the website. It's really simple, just one for loop. Let's run the code. Processing, we are checking if it works correctly. Congratulations, there is only one sample case because they specified already in the task that they want it from 1 to 50. So there are no inputs, there are no variables here. There are no variable number of iterations here. There is a variable, this element. It's getting access to each element of the collection, but it's every time repeated exactly 50 times. So that's it. Only one test case. Pretty simple task.